Oh, I put my glasses on. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole Budget Meeting Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. Council Chambers. Land acknowledgement. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional and ancestral and ceded territories of the Inkakatma and Syilx people. Adoption of minutes. Committee of the Whole meeting minutes, April 18th, 2023. Recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on April 18th, 2023 be adopted. Councillor Egan, Councillor Etchart. Any errors or omissions? Oh, look at that. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Delegations and recognitions? None. Unfinished business. Oh, my pen is dying. Unfinished business. 2023-2027 financial plan to be introduced by Ms. Thiessen. Over to you.
Oh, that's not what I want. No, I probably want the window. It's not coming up. Sorry. I don't see the PowerPoint on here.
Try the entire screen option.
Not weird.
Yeah, I think I have to go to the entire screen. Sorry.
That's weird. I have the PowerPoint open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's open.
That is weird.
Isn't that weird?
Happens if you from beginning.
Yeah, I thought that's where I was. Oh, there you go. Okay, there we go.
Perfect.
Sorry for the delay. Just a little technical glitch. No, it's more the operator error, I think. I'll take credit for that. So just before I get into the report that went out with the agenda, I just wanted to give you a quick idea of what we're doing tonight. So we're going to go through, take a look at the draft operating budget, which talks a little bit about what happened in operating in 2022. Give us a start, and then we'll look at capital items, as well as there is just a few of the operating items that were still outstanding that I just had printed out. So I'll pass these to Linda, if you can just pass on to council, and then we'll go through those, and so you'll have a chance to say yay or nay, and then hopefully we will be in a position that I can prepare a draft for next week. I just want to add the provisional, just so council is aware, we've talked about it before, it is an unusual year under unusual circumstances, so we will be doing the draft, we will be doing the financial plan for adoption next week. But it can be amended. If anything comes up, if there's any further grants that come forward or something changes and you want to make some changes, it can be amended. The only thing that can't be amended will be the amount of taxes that we collect. But other than that, it can be amended with reserves, so if there's any changes. So if council's unsure at all, feel free to, as we go through the options tonight, feel free to leave something out if you would like, or, you know, put it in. We've got some items that are labeled as grant dependent only, things like that. So it can be changed as we go along. So things can always be added, I guess, is the important one. So council received, attached to the agenda, published with the agenda, was a 2023 financial plan with the draft operating budget. And I prepared this schedule, just the operating, and again, for discussion purposes, I've left out the amortization figures because they're a net in and an out, and it just inflates the numbers as far as the budget goes. And the recovery, we're still working on finalizing the recovery budget And we're close, but we're not there yet. So I have left that out. And for the most part, that will be a net in and out as well with the recovery funding. So we have that report. And I just summarized some of the highlights of what we've talked about during the budget process. And then the draft financial plan. So in the 2023 draft budget column for taxation, I used the option that I gave you options, I used the option that resulted in a 5% tax increase on the average residential house, which for a house of around 500,000, it would be about $90 for the year. And that's the model I used. It seemed to generate a reasonable amount. We made the adjustments and it seemed reasonable, but if council would like us to use a different rate, I need to know that tonight. If there's want to have any discussion on that. Everybody's good with that? So parcel taxes have stayed fairly much the same. Some of these numbers, parcel taxes, sale of services, they all took a bit of a dip with COVID and with the flooding. So we're just starting to get back to full operations as far as parks and recreation and a few of the others. And we still are not fully, we don't have all our households that used to be on water and sewer up and running yet. What else can I discuss on here? The government grants are a little bit lower, but there are some grants that are coming in on the capital side that'll bring that up. But those are all the regular reoccurring non-conditional grants that we get from government are coming in at the same rate as before. So that's consistent. And the regional grants from the TNRD and other areas, those are just slight, like a 2% increase through what's been negotiated in the contracts. And the return on investments, I've estimated it at about 4,000. That's probably quite low, but we wanted to keep it on the low side because we're not sure what the interest, and we are spending some of the money that's in the account from the prepaid grants for recovery. So we won't have as much money in our accounts as we move forward. Does anybody have any questions?
Sorry, you just mentioned return on investments at 4,000. Did you mean
400,000?
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Sorry,
okay,
yes.
Thank you.
400,000. Yes. It's a couple zeros.
Councillor Rogan?
Regarding licenses, permits, and fines, so it's license permits, it's clear. What type of fines it's included here?
That would be dog license, dog fines, parking fines, and the bylaw would issue those kind of fines.
Do we have a breakdown or a balance of unpaid fines?
I'm sure we could get that. I don't think it's really anything significant.
It's nothing significant. That's my question. So
it isn't significant. Generally, what we've done is send them. I can't remember the date. Once they get to a certain date of being stale, we send it off to collections. Unless we haven't had any that are of one single person where it would make sense to go to litigation on them. And so for as long as I've been here, it's always just gone to collections for whatever's left over. And it's been an amount usually sub 1,000, but never more than 5, I don't think, in my time here. So it's a smaller amount.
I have one more question. So it's about other revenue. So I noticed that the 2022 annual budget was to 392 versus the actuals of 2022, right? So I just want to understand the rationale, and also for the 2023 draft budget is 425, and I was checking here your additional other revenue.
Yeah, and yes, so in the issue for 2022 was there was an accrual issue. We get we have a franchise fee that we collect from Fortis every year. And they always send us the amount. They used to send us the amount. How did that work? They let us know, so we would put it in the budget for the next year, and then it would come. But it's changed, And so we had 1 year where we accrued it, and then the next year, so last year, there was a year that we didn't use the accrual. And so for 2022, in order to catch up, because now we get it in the same year that they tell us what the amount is. So 1 year in the past, we doubled up on it. And this is just the 1 year that it was, and it's around $100,000. So that's the gist there. It's just an accrual.
Yeah, that answered my question then.
Yeah.
Sorry, on your ROI, what types of investments? Just money?
We have money market funds with Municipal Finance Authority, and we also have GICs with the Royal Bank.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? So when you look at the,
Councilor Richard?
Just for a point of comment, I know in the past return on investment it was something like 90,000 in years past, but that's nice because where we've lost on other non-market or non-tax revenue through the pool or whatever, this last year has been quite nice, or has it been 2 maybe even, I'm thinking.
Last year, 2022, and then we expect 2023 to be fairly good. But we also have had more money in our bank accounts because the province has been prepaying grants.
Yeah.
Rather than us spending the money first and then getting the money.
Yeah, so that's also nice too.
So it gives us a little extra bonus.
Because I don't think I've ever seen that over 100,000 before.
Yeah.
So it's nice. Thanks.
Yeah, well, we can't get too used to it.
Councilor Charney?
With this $400,000 on the return on investments, how much approximately do we have invested?
Well, it fluctuates. Mr. Thompson can probably answer that question at this point. Normally, we would run probably between $8 and $10 million that we would have in our reserves. Basically, our reserves and our surpluses are with MFA, but we have extra funds. Mr. Thompson, do you know how much we have invested right now?
About 40 million.
Yeah.
40 million?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that this is one that we'll probably do a bit of refinement on. Totally, Sheila's right that you want to be conservative, especially because we're not 100% sure if there is going to be a desire to see interest allocated towards certain things. But I think that we've already actually made more than 400,000 this year. We're right at that number, seeing the amount that we have invested from the prepaid grants that came in. Most notably was the large $24 million grant that we received from the provincial government that has kind of carried that for a period of time. So it's what drove the higher number in 2022, and strongly suspect that number might be kind of approaching the 7-figure value for 2023.
And my thoughts on being conservative on the revenue side, especially for like return on investments, if we do make significantly more, then that would be an automatic transfer into a reserve either for future borrowing costs or revenue stabilization if it's not required by the province to use it for recovery projects.
Councilor
Yes, and just maybe a point of clarity for the newer councillors on how the MFA works in regards to investments.
Yes.
I know, obviously, just with time, they follow a very strict guideline as far as investings, but some people might not know that, so.
Yeah, the MFA has, and even the municipality as a whole has to follow very strict guidelines with our investments. We can't go and invest in mutual funds or the principal has to be guaranteed, so there you are limited. And MFA does have a number of options, but we are able to invest through banks as well. So it's, that Mr. Thompson has been taking care of that, so. Trying to get the best deals that we can and make sure we have access to the money when we need it so we don't lock it up too tight. Okay, no other questions right now? Okay, so just when you look at the bottom of the statement, we've got a transfer to surplus under the actuals for, and this is similar to what I had forecast earlier. It was around $1 million. For surplus, and That seems high, but when you're looking at a $20 million budget and with some of the uncertainty that's gone on during the year, it's, we definitely don't want to be in the other direction. And then some of the capital, we have some capital projects that will be carried forward that will use up some of that surplus as well that we budgeted for. We didn't spend it this year or in 2022. Anything else on that?
Councillor Hogan?
So going back to expenditures.
Yes.
So, general government, so I was just a little surprised to see the 18% increase, right? If we compare the 2023 draft budget with prior year. Yeah, it's, do you happen to have a breakdown? So I specifically would like to see the breakdown for general government as well as development services, because it's we're talking about 12% and 18% increases.
Yeah. Well, general development services actually is going down a little bit because we budgeted 1.4 last year, and we're going to be budgeting 1.3 this year. And the difference there is there are some projects there that weren't done. And so they've just been carried forward. So if it was a project worth 100,000, there might have been 5,000 or 10,000 spent on it last year. So we're carrying forward the 95. So it's just a little bit lower. Their budget development services has stayed fairly consistent. General government, we have some new positions in there, like we have a financial analyst. It was budgeted for last year, but it was only budgeted for a portion of the year. And we're currently, right now, I have them in at the full year. But as I tweak the budget in this next week, then I'll reduce those because we haven't filled those positions. So there's so we have that, and that's why it was lower. Why we were under, because we had some empty positions. The records coordinator has been included in there. In 2022, the communications manager was only budgeted at half a year. So the position was there, but it was empty for part of the year, so it was only budgeted at half a year. So I can give you a more specific breakdown when I present next week.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that report? Okay, so next I'll bring up see if I can do this, Greg. So we have the smaller sheet has the operations that are outstanding, and I will just bring that up. There we go. Oh, because of my sore hand up there. Oops. It's going to be difficult. There we go. That should be that one. And then I have to hit share. It's annoying. There we go. There we go. Okay, perfect. So, that's not. Can I borrow that? I apparently gave all my copies out. This one. So this one that you have that's just shorter, there's just a few operational ones on there. And I just wanted we had one on there for the action reconciliation, which we redlined for more information. And I don't know if council got a chance to talk to the Director of Development Services about that during the open house, or if they are still looking for more information on that one. That was the action reconciliation. Did anybody have any comments on that one?
Councillor Newman.
My understanding was that the director was going to put forward a report providing more information
Okay.
that we weren't I did speak to her at the open house.
Okay, but you're expecting a report. So this is perfectly one of those items that we can be added in. Will be able to be addressed at a later date. So we'll just hold that one.
Councillor Charney?
I'm still back to this $90,000, and what can we do for $90,000 that we aren't doing now? This is what boggled my mind last time.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand that.
Yep, okay.
So-
So we'll leave it, continue to leave it off for now until council.
It would be a good idea, because I've had conversation with Lacey on this, but I think council needs to get their.
They need a more
as well.
full report than you're gonna
And
get at
it's-
something like this.
It's one of these where you're right there,
Yeah.
there, so, yeah.
Okay, so we'll leave that one off. The climate adaptation and mitigation strategy, now that sounds like it could be grant funding, so we could include that in and make it a conditional that if they get the grant funding, if that's okay with council.
Any comments on that? Just see if anybody had any ideas on that.
If council isn't sure about it, we'll just to be on the safe side, we'll just leave it off.
Well, I think we're at the point where we know we have, because of what we've gone through and what could possibly happen.
Yeah.
There's another one that you're right there
Yeah.
again, so.
So, yep.
um,
And the social development coordinator, I would assume I circulated, there was some feedback.
Councillor Moon?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, just going back to the climate adaptation and mitigation strategy. I thought we approved this pending grant funding, was my understanding.
Okay,
on this
that's,
one.
I just had a note that it was grant, so, okay, I'll include that, I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
that was my recollection on that
Okay.
at least.
Good. So the social development coordinator. I know council had decided to move that to 2024. I just want to confirm I did circulate some information after the public open house. So we'll continue with that to 2024. Recabling the old fire hall. That, I think we've discussed that, but I didn't in my notes have a clear whether we were going to move ahead with that one.
I don't think there was any
Anything,
decision
so-
not to.
Okay, so
It's
that's
becoming a bit of a hazard with all the wires hanging off the
Yeah.
wall and stuff, so I think we agreed, unless I'm incorrect.
okay. And then there's a few in here that Rick's here to answer for, just in operations. Rick, you have one of these sheets as well, the shorter one. Here, I'll give it to you. Sorry. So the ones were increase in contracted services for parks. It was an increase of 13,700. The diking expenditures and airport contracted services, the weed control, snow removal supplies and snow removal chemical supplies, and then roadway repairs contracted services. So if anybody has any questions, Rick is here to answer those or any concerns. Okay, if everybody's good with that, there's nothing, no real huge amounts in there. And I think, and I'm sure Rick can testify, will say that if he gets the money but doesn't need it all, he won't spend it.
Councillor Moon?
I'm just curious, I know we brought it up 2 weeks ago at the budget about breaking it down per department, i.e. Public Works and their requests coming forward. I'm just not sure. Because these, I thought we passed the ones that are on this list, so, and we were just going to review all the requests per department. So I'm
Okay.
Well, the one that I think we had some issues with was where we started to get a little confused was the sidewalk grinder attachment, the trackless sidewalk maintenance machine. That's where we needed more info.
Yeah, those are on the capital side, yeah.
And talking to Rick at I think Wendy and I, we saw the pictures, got an idea of what we were talking about, but I'm not sure. Oh, there's lots of blinking lights. Hold on a second. Councilor Egan.
Yeah, that was my point as well. I thought all these other ones on the general operating requests we had basically approved.
Yeah.
And we wanted to see what the actual sidewalk maintenance program was, what the plan actually was. And I think what we all want to see is the various plans for each of these items in Public Works.
Okay. Yeah, so my apologies for bringing these back. I just wasn't 100% clear. There's been a lot of...
Well, we asked for them to come back because we were confused whether certain things attached to a certain piece of equipment or if it was a
and the snow removal was kind of the whole thing,
yeah.
So
that's, I think, where we had a little bit of a quandary is what... And I mean, I'm aware now because I talked with Rick and I think Wendy, we were there at the same time. Councilor Charney, sorry. So saw what I needed to see, but I don't know if the rest of council has any questions on those pieces where it says more info on those pieces of equipment.
Well, that's on the capital sheet right now, so we're just working on the operating sheet,
Right,
so we'll just finish it. So the only one that I know we absolutely didn't discuss was the stipend for ESS directors, and I circulated a sheet for that last time, and we just didn't get to it before the last meeting, so it'd be at the last page, I think, of those backups, if you have it with you.
Actually, Sheila, that I think is... If I could maybe talk to that one, that should not just be for ESS directors, it should be for ESS workers. I think that was aimed at the volunteers.
Yes, it's aimed at the volunteers, so it's aimed at whoever's acting as the director and the deputy director, like for when they're on call. Because when they're actually working in an ESS, I think they get reimbursed.
No.
Don't they get paid now?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought they.
And I do believe Krista was bringing this forward to actually pay the people that were sitting behind the desks and getting people.
Just trying to find it.
I can comment. So on this one here, the intent, and I don't think it's nearly far enough, but I think that ultimately it's somewhat a provincial program, and so it makes it difficult when it's the municipality funding it. The idea here is that those volunteers that are leading the program, so in this case it would be Terry and Nicole, would be eligible for a stipend because they're the ones that are always the on-call. This does not at this point include funding for paying the workers who are taking intake during an actual event. This is a stipend to be able to acknowledge that the person carrying that phone has to show up, hell or high water. So.
No, thank you for that. Because I know that Krista had been pushing for payment all the way across, and I have to be honest, most volunteers wouldn't accept it anyway, and they wouldn't. So thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, so this $17,000 would go into the emergency preparedness function and would be paid out of that if we chose to put that on.
I have no problem supporting it. I mean, just have a look at this last weekend with the fire we had over the hill. I'm sure that Terry and Nicole had plans that were suddenly altered. So I know she was out quite late that night. So I have no problem supporting that at all. So.
Okay.
If there's anyone else that has do we need to make a motion for you on that one, or just
no, that's good. I just need to, and I've got a consensus, so that's good. Okay. So then we can move on to the capital sheet we have. Try and make this a little bit bigger. to balance. For the capital projects,
For the city, the whole city.
for everything.
The budget for this year.
Well, we don't have to reduce to balance because what we have, we'll be using reserves and surpluses to balance. So we have fairly healthy surpluses and we have some reserves. And we also, some of these projects have grant funding, so I've included them on here for council to see them. So the question is the priorities, like which projects are the most important to get going, and then we will make sure those are budgeted this year, and then once we finish the year end and know for sure the surplus and the reserves, then the other items could be added in as required. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, normally we would have the surplus amount right now in the reserve, and I could tell you this is what we have, and if we want to keep 600,000 to roll forward to next year, then we could do that. But we are still just working through that and trying to, with the recovery and response expenses, square that all off.
Councillor Charney?
Is this a general conversation, or are we doing line by line?
I'm open to however council would like to do it. Probably up to Your Honor.
Well, we've talked about quite a few of them. The ones that I think we were looking at were the ones that have more info behind them because we've talked about the others.
But I do have one here. Recreation and it's got a ban. That was not on last.
Yeah, that's a carry forward. You'll see a CF under the new carry forward. And that was approved last year. But the van wasn't purchased until this year.
But why wasn't it put on our budget for last time? We didn't see that.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that it was a carry forward. Like I didn't have it on the list.
It's already done, Wendy.
It's already been passed, so.
We bought it because it was in the budget for the last round. I actually think this is one of the ones that was in the reports that came to council. If you check what was emailed to you guys, I think for April, but there was a van that was in the budget for the 2022 budget year. Weren't able to get a hold of that van, and so they ended up pivoting to a pickup truck that was purchased and is now in the fleet.
So, and I think that's probably where the confusion came, where I wasn't notified that it was outstanding from the budget last year, like that it was continuing. So, because it had already been purchased, so it was a done deal.
So it still comes out of this budget?
Yeah.
It was budgeted for last time, so we had surplus for last year, so part of the 2 some odd surplus that you'll see in actual is 70, what's the number on that? 63,000 of that is going to be explained by the lack of purchase.
But it was actually budgeted to be borrowed, so we will be coming to council to borrow that.
Councillor Newman?
So just, sorry, and for clarity, I'm just, the capital request sheet that you've provided here is everything we discussed, it's actually everything, correct?
Yes, except for the things that you've outright.
That we've already said no.
Yes.
Okay, and then, so with this and the 4 carry forwards, what are we looking at as far as total increase right now? Because my brain works differently than setting 5% and trying to achieve that. I just want to know on everything we've discussed so far, where are we sitting at?
Well, for the capital items, they are being funded either through grants, reserves, or borrowing.
So only this small list right here is what will affect the actual taxes?
Yeah.
And so 333,000?
Yes. But we're not minus probably half of that with what the items that we've put off on that sheet.
To 2024 and subsequent years?
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have a working number that we're looking at so far? Like,
yeah, so if you look at the other sheet, this report
the one that,
that I gave you with the 2023 budget.
Yep, this one?
Yes, okay. So we're budgeting a revenue right now of $20 million. Just
Okay,
over 20 million, with operating expenses of 18.7. And that leaves us with 1.2 of a surplus, but that we pay down our debt, use it for debt payments, transfer money into the reserves, so 1.3 would be going towards reserves or these capital projects.
Right.
Capital projects, and then a transfer out.
Of the 314.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 300, so
Of the third column, the 1.2.
the 1.2.
Balances.
All right, so then with that balance there, where are we sitting at an increase on that one? That's even 5% right there?
That's a 5% increase on a residential home.
Right, so do we have an ability to work backwards and know what we're tentatively looking at because we've just removed some more items?
Those numbers that I gave you have not been included in this budget yet, those ones.
Oh, so
there'd be another 150 added in there. But 100, I haven't, those ones that were not decided I hadn't included yet.
So do we have a means of doing that or like approximately? I mean, I look at it like next week is our last opportunity prior to adopting the budget, regardless if we can make amendments as the year goes forward. We like to say that we're looking at a 5% increase, or we'd like to aim for a 5% increase. But right now, I mean, can we get that a little closer? Can we confidently say we're looking at 4.5 or we're 4.25? I mean, I'm just curious.
Okay, well, just trying to figure out how to phrase this, because we've talked about during the budget presentations, just determining that what tax rate we'd be comfortable with and then using that. So that's the amount that I have there is what I was planning on collecting in taxes, and that amount wouldn't change. Does that make sense?
So then for clarity, then we're looking at 5% regardless of what we approve or don't approve?
Yes, that's my...
Okay, thank you.
I'm trying to figure out how to explain it, Sean and Ray. Traditionally, we've done, if we did just taxes and didn't do reserves and surpluses, the tax increase would be astronomical. Because we don't have a total firm handle on our reserves and surpluses, it's difficult.
So, thank you. I'm not necessarily trying to advocate for this being the proper mechanism, but I'll try to explain why I think that that's a sensible approach in the circumstances. So, Council might recall that what we talked about earlier is that at the end of the day, the City of Merritt needs to be spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 to $7.5 million on capital each year in order to be addressing your infrastructure deficit. The surplus that we're projecting coming out of the operating side is let me just check the figure, is 1.226. for this year. And so that's 1.226 that maybe you grant leverage that into 2.4 or some odd. And so what I can tell you is that even at 1.226, we're still not where we need to be yet in order to regularly fund this. So could you decide that, hey, we're okay operationally, and so we wanted to scale that amount of tax back? There's always that option to do that, but I can very safely tell you that even with the amount of additional revenue that we'd be taking at 5% because of the offsets that we've had on inflationary increases, thankfully we're buffeted a little bit this year by, again, Nikola Clean Power's last portion coming off as well as Trans Mountain coming in to hope to grow that so that even though it's 5% of the whole, there's about another 5% that's explained by new market activities. That even with what we're seeing here, we're still spending out of reserves in order to get what I think is a fairly normal amount of capital projects done. And so I can say that I don't have the same visibility into this as I would like, and I can hear it in your comments that you feel much the same way. That's understandable. I'm totally sympathetic to that, but I can say with a very high degree of confidence that even with what's there, it's not enough over the long term to be funding the capital plan. And so I would highly recommend not going lower than a 5% figure for this year, but that's completely within council's prerogative in an environment where you don't have all the information, and that sucks. That's about what I have to add.
And if I can say, traditionally, you would maybe have your capital plan set out, and you would have your reserves in place ahead of time in your grants. So then you would use your taxes to balance, but the city is not in that position. So you would adjust your taxes a little bit.
My concern would be that would we be in that position next year, or like, and I don't necessarily know that it's because of flood situation, right? Like, I mean, I'm looking at the budget and we're going project by project, so to speak, but I don't see us necessarily taking care of anything that's required large core for the future, right? Like and I'm having a very hard time with the budget, not because of how it's just it's something I've never seen before. So
yes, well, I think we can probably all relate to that.
Yeah, the short of it is you guys need a director of finance here like 6 months ago, but you really need one here to be the one that's leading council in the overall strategic elements as it relates to financial things. I'm so grateful for the team of Sheila and Norm for the work that they've done kind of patching holes in the system, but this is not the right way to make decisions as an organization. It's just not. We know it, and I know you guys know it, and you see it. The challenge that we have is that despite the fact that you're looking through an opaque glass right now instead of one that's perfectly transparent, the numbers aren't going to change so wildly that the right answer at this point is to scale back what the amount of taxes being charged is. Because though the process needs to change year over year so that you can come in knowing exactly how things are bundled and what the overall core of projects looks like, it isn't going to change the financial reality of the city, which is until we find a way to grow that tax base in in non-market changes, see new, particularly industrial development come online, it's going to be pretty thin in terms of actually getting closer to where you need to be on addressing that infrastructure deficit. So take what you will. Know that I was there out there with you guys at SOGA last week, and so I've got a bit less familiarity with these numbers, but I do acknowledge that where things have come out does not surprise me, and I will acknowledge as well to Claire's point that I don't think all of this is flood driven directly, but I do think that part of the reason we've had the staffing challenges that we have is still stemming back as a secondary effect from the flood. And so
yeah, I think this is about the third time we've had this explanation, so I think we kind of all got it now. So, yeah, it's about the third time I've heard it now, so okay. No more apologies.
Yeah, I can say you do have a really robust reserve and surplus policy, and previously, prior to the flooding, that was on track to be started, where there was money being put into the reserves on a regular basis. And even like ideally, if the year-end statements were done at this point, then you could say this is our surplus and this is how we're distributing it according to the policy. It's just not. But I think the parts are all there, and I think for next year for sure, that you guys, if council desires, there will be the ability, and you have the staff in place, the policies are all there to.
I can tell you straight out, when we get a CFO, the budget will be completely different than this year.
Yes.
It'll start way earlier.
Yeah, they'll start right as soon as they start.
Done the way most of us are used to doing a budget. Yeah. This year's a limp budget. It is what it is. Councillor Etchert.
Would it be reasonable to say that if we leave it at 5% with the other revenue sources, that we're ending up with about 1.2 because we have our 5% just, and not having to worry about taking anything out because the reserve policies and grant is paying for the other pieces. So
Yeah.
we're ending up almost like we have 10% increase, but only charging 5 because we have the other revenue sources.
Yeah, yes.
Trying to water it down, sort of.
Yeah, for the presentation to the public, so next week I will frame it so that, that this is how we're doing in the thing. We have quite a few grants that are able to help us do the capital projects, so.
Well, I mean, compared to some of the increases that we're seeing in other communities, if we're only at 5, we're not as bad as Surrey at 18, so.
Yeah. Yes.
TNRD went 7.5.
Yeah, so that seems reasonable at 5%.
Yeah, and that was kind of my goal to get something that is, because the community's been through a lot, right? And not create a big shock this year, so.
Thank you.
Councillor Rogan?
Yeah, I think that the 5% is not the problem. I think that, yes, it is reasonable. The concern is what are we going to do moving forward? Because right now we are able to do that because we are withdrawing from the reserves. But at some point, it's like there is not going to be money on that, and we are not able to put any money back there. So, and for my own, understanding, I thought that the 5% was not set in stone; that it was going to be just a starting point, and we were going to be going and discussing if we were going to stay there. That was my understanding. That I thought that it was going to be still, changeable. Mm-hmm. So. I feel a little bit, concerned, because as all of you know, when we were campaigning, that was the main issue, right? So taxes. But at the same time, now with all this new information that we have, like even with the 1.2 that is gonna the surplus, that we are not even close where we are supposed to be. And I think that we have like a mayor said, we have to start working in our budget 2024 early to be able to come up with a strategy to have to be in a better situation.
Well, I agree with you, and I think the fact is that we have 4 new councillors, and of course you have a good knowledge of budget. Some, like myself, is not really inclined to budget, but as we come into next year, I think that's where the rubber meets the road, especially if we have a CFO, because I'm usually used to starting budget in end of November. Mm-hmm. That's usually when we start, and we have the hard conversations and stuff like that. So that's just me. Councillor Charney.
I just want to know on the airport security at $405,467 and the airport lease lot grading at $519,000. Those are both grants. Mm-hmm. So why do we put it into our capital requests and it affects the amount that looks like we as taxpayers are paying for that?
Because you have to.
You have to? Can it not go into a different fund saying, this is what we've done, but we've got it through grants, and it doesn't look like, because that is just about $1 million that we would be cutting off this $7,839,000 that isn't coming out of our expenses.
It has to be part of the plan, though.
Yeah, I can see it has to be part of the plan.
Yeah, in the plan, I will bring it will show how the funding is broken down, like that this much is coming from.
But it's still not part of our expenses that we as a city have to pay.
Well, in a way you do, because the money was given to you, and now you have to pay the money. So you have to have a paper trail. So
on the budget, the capital amount, if you say you approve $5 million, we have to report $5 million as expenses. $4 million of that could come from grant, but that shows up in the budget as revenue.
Sarah Smith?
Yeah, I think that the goal here is you're wanting to understand the funding sources, and what's coming from grant, what's coming from which pots at the end of the day. And grant is the key one, because whether it's Vote Street or other things, fairly significant portions of this are grant funded, which is why we could afford to do a much larger chunk of capital projects. As we said there, we've got a 1.2 million surplus is what we're forecasting. We're still planning on pulling out an additional 1.2 in reserves, which kind of think of that as 2.4. The other, like, almost $5 million that's there is explained by grant. And so you need to see that, and that's a fair point, so that you can have a degree of confidence that most of the cost of the projects that's on this page is grant funded.
Okay.
Or reserve funded.
On the draft financial plan, it says for revenue grants, 1,675,000, but on here that far exceeds that.
Well, the draft financial plan is just for the operations, not the capital.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah,
Right.
so then when in the final draft, I'll have the capital in.
Okay.
So you'll see a line for capital expenditures and then the offsetting grant revenue.
Okay.
Councillor Richard?
Just adding to the point, we have to show everything that we plan on doing as part of our adopting of the plan for the year. And just going with Councillor Ogan's comment earlier, I think the concern about not having enough in reserves is a concern for all of us. And just trying to get everything in order and growth will happen. We have a lot of properties that have been affected that maybe aren't even paying into the sewer taxes or the parcel taxes for this year. But once we have things improved, maybe then we'll have more improvement and chances to catch our breath and see more development, like with the new lots that are happening, hopefully, up top off of Band Street with the 72 lots. If that comes online in the next year or two, then you'll see more parcels paying into the water sewer parcel tax. And with more housing, maybe we'll have more businesses that we can attract that way as well. So, because I know in 2018, 2019, we had a similar thing for budget terms. So we have a chance to turn this around, hopefully. But I agree, we do need to start thinking about reserves and putting into it and putting in more to keep up with our deficit of infrastructure.
We were talking about reserves in 2008 when I came in as first-time councillor and all the way through. It's what you talk about every year.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm excited that the Finance Committee will be up and running, and we'll have some input with that. So that Finance Committee will have some good say into that once it fires up.
And I would just would like to recommend that council consider maybe not this year, but in future years, having a line item just for reserves, like 1% or 2%, and you can just run it as a separate line item to show, so that stays consistent, and then you can adjust your tax. So you got your base. I mean, that's how a lot of municipalities are doing it, because otherwise if you changing your tax rates, it's easy for that to get lost.
So do we, on this page where the 5 more info items, do we feel we want to get more info on that and get that tucked in?
Yeah.
The ones that have more info, the...
Councillor Charney has a question.
Oh, Councillor Charney.
Yes, on your thought, Mayor Getz, I would like to
It's
hear...
actually Your Highness. I'm kidding.
I would like to hear from Mr. Green, and I'm quite interested in that machine he has that can have multiple functions for it that might replace some of these other items that we wanted more info on.
There we go. You are on.
Okay, Your Honor, councillors, the trackless machine that we have proposed is a multi-function machine that a lot of other urban municipalities are using these days because it can do so many things. It'll probably be the busiest machine we have in the entire city. One of the things that we had talked about before as far as attachments for it, and I do have, of course I left it over there, all the pictures and stuff that showed what it would do, was a grinder that we were going to put on the skid steer. We've priced out the grinder that will go on this machine as well, and they are within $1,500 of equal value. I'd left it as a skid steer one mainly because if the trackless machine doesn't get approved, we still want it for the skid steer. If the trackless machine is approved, we would prefer to have the one that goes on that machine. It moves around a lot better, it's quicker. I mean, a skid steer is slow moving around town. This thing will boogie around pretty good. It'll be good for snow removal. You can put mowers on these things, all kinds of attachments that are set for our world. They actually design these machines for our world. We do have the existing machine that they've been clearing sidewalks with that is a little bit constrained in its ability. So it's got a little scoop bucket and it's got a blade on it, and that's largely what it does. It's not good for much else. I would suggest that for the short term, we look at hanging on to that. And I didn't propose selling things like that at this point. But what we can do is going into next winter, we can continue to use that for clearing snow on sidewalks and smaller parking lots where we continue to have issues, at least what I've witnessed this year, largely in areas that are hard to get with the bigger machines, or they're busy on other things. We can move in with smaller machines. If we wanted to later and you wanted to see some of the other stuff turned over, we can definitely look at putting a sale out for some of what we call surplus equipment as we bring new stuff in. Same conversation with the garbage truck. I wasn't selling a garbage truck right now. We were just buying another one with the idea we'd split our flow up. So the trackless machine itself, it's got buckets, it's got diggers, it's got plows, V-plows. You can do grinders, one that'll do asphalt, one that'll do concrete. We're interested in the concrete one right now. I can have a look at the specific list of things that Mike was looking at that were the must-haves, but it was mostly snow removal and general maintenance that he was after. But mowers, tow-behind mowers, what do they call them, the sickle mowers that you can do ditches with. I think I had proposed at one point a municipal tractor. We can put the attachment we would have wanted for that on this machine and have it do rural road shoulders as well.
So Rick, the 222, I'm assuming that's the baseline. Does that come with anything or just the machine? Is there any attachments included with that? Or?
Yes, it didn't include the grinder, but it included the basic things that Mike needed for the initial year, which was largely snow removal, a bucket, a blade, and there was a water tank and a sprayer for parks.
So I'm assuming the 42,000 would then be tacked on this for the grinder.
If you approve the grinder, we would, and the trackless, we would get the grinder to go with the trackless instead of the grinder to go with the skid steer.
So which was more, the one for this one or one for the skid steer? Just curious, the $1,500, I'm curious.
I think the skid steer was a hair more.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Newman, you're up.
Just in regards to this machine as well, and you're mentioning having this piece of equipment that'll go on the skid steer or this one, would it be better, and I'm just curious as to why, if we were able to put on the skid steer and this being the new most heavily used piece of equipment, we might be able to use both at the same time and accomplish twice as much versus just always depending on one machine. And same for snow removal, same thing in the back of my head. I'm thinking keeping the skid steer because obviously now we have two avenues for removing snow. I think that's come wintertime, that could be a great thing, not eliminating one. So, we've talked about having a snow removal plan going forward and, how we might be able to alter it to make it better in the downtown core. Yeah. So I'm just wondering if there's been thought put to that.
Yep, so the grinder itself would go on one or the other, not on both. You'd order the one for the trackless. That's basically a summertime activity when we identify through sidewalk inspections that we need to clean grades up where there's trip edges and stuff like that. If it's something that warrants a grind, we'd go grind it. If you need to patch some cement in instead, or if you need to mud jack or replace a panel, the goal here all the time is to be able to react to something that's dangerous right now. So that's a very specified tool instead of waiting for a contractor, going through the tendering process, finding out and, having, 30 or so different sites and saying, come in and do them. And then we have dangers in the meantime while we're waiting for that to happen. I want to be able to react to stuff as we find them. The snow removal is a bit of a different animal. The skid steers are always valuable there. We generally keep one at the compost site, and that's a conversation that we are going to be having in the next little while as well, as far as the path forward in that world, because there's a lot of complexities there. So one skid steer is currently there all the time. The other skid steer is generally in the yard and then running around helping out with different activities as we go. One of them's actually got the motor out of it right now, which is very disappointing, but it's had a nasty breakdown, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about the self-propelled floor saw?
Right, so when we're doing cuts on concrete or asphalt for a repair, it's, in order to get a good repair afterwards, it's imperative that we have good clean cuts on things. The hand saw that they're running right now, all the time, is you gotta take things in stages. It's a little harder on the guys trying to use it. Having something that'll do more depth-wise, because a lot of our asphalt gets built up pretty thick, so we end up with something with a larger blade that sits on the ground that'll self-propel, rather than the person operating it trying to run one of the hand ones trying to push it through. So thin stuff, the hand one's fine, but for a lot of the road cuts when we're repairing divots in the road and whatnot, and or concrete, it'll go right through concrete as well. So if we have to do a panel replacement, we can cut right through it, 5 inches, no problem, and make the changes. And the goal with a lot of that concrete is too, when we're looking at panel replacements, I want our guys to be able to form them up and get the concrete in them and finish them, so.
I'm assuming this self-propelled also has the water injection itself.
You betcha.
With the hand one, is there a danger of kickbacks on that?
Yeah, it's one of those things, I get scared to use them, and I've used them quite a bit over my life, and you still got a fair bit of respect, just like a chainsaw, for them when you pick them up.
And when you're using the hand one, they actually have to just dump water as it goes along, correct?
Depends on the unit. I'm not too familiar with ours, so I haven't seen it in action yet. I just know that it's a handheld.
Okay.
A lot of the handhelds have small bits of water with them, or you can put them into a siphon tank to pull out, or you can apply water in other ways, yeah.
Councilor Richard?
Just curious, right now in a year, what do you think we spend on contracting out sidewalk repair? If you had to guess. Because right now we don't have the equipment to do that properly, right?
Yeah, it's, traditionally, they've brought in a grinder guy, and I'm not sure if I've seen the last time, and I'm not even sure it was done last year, which is probably why it's not in my radar. But I would guess to mob somebody in, if there's 20 different spots that need to be grinded, you know, that's probably a $10,000, $15,000 per year hit right on its own.
Yeah, so if we buy 2 attachments, it pays for itself within a certain number of years, and it's probably increased since 2021 anyway.
Yes, and ideally we're increasing the safety as well, because we can react a lot better.
Yeah.
I don't want to stick with one solution for everything.
No.
I want to look at each problem and go, what's the best solution? Do we level the concrete? Do we grind it down? Do we replace something?
Well, if we're saving money on not contracting out services for safety repairs, MIABC will be happy with this as well, making things a little less dangerous for slip and falls and things that cost us money.
Yeah, and we've been out doing sidewalk inspections.
Yeah.
And Tristan's provided Mike with a list already of things that he's found, and he codes them for, minor repair, which could be just a quick leveling, and then major ones, and I think I already saw 7 majors on this year's inspection.
Yeah.
And he has them down as red dots on the sheet that he gives Mike, and those are ones that were, okay, what do we do now, right?
Councilwoman?
Just another question in regards to the ongoing garbage cans for $50,000. Would this come out of our garbage collection, or is this coming out of the general capital requests?
So as a project, you can help me with that a little bit if you like, Sheila. It's not something I focused on a heck of a lot. It's hanging there and funded, but they've been replacing garbage cans by the sounds of it as they break and wear out. So is this an annual thing, or is it one? It's not a project I focused on.
Well, this is one of the items with having new staff. I'm not 100% sure how it's been handled in the past. Like, traditionally we budgeted so much, and the idea was if you don't spend it in the year, you would move it into a reserve so that you'd have it when you needed it.
Yeah, but then this would show up in the capital side.
Yes, it would show up in the
Replacement of
capital
garbage
side.
cans, I would consider more of an operational expense as we go, because you're not replacing them en masse. We did have a significant purchase recently because of all the ones that went into the
So,
RV park where the new trailers are going and whatnot, so there was a fairly good expenditure there. That was operationally charged.
yeah, operationally, was it charged operationally or did it come through the recovery?
We may get it back that way, but we
Yes.
initially did it up through
Through the
the,
operation?
How many garbage cans did we lose during the flood?
that's a very good question.
I know there was a,
The tally's still probably coming, because we still get calls with, my garbage can went down the river, and I've been sharing my neighbors, and those calls still come in. We did get a lot, I'm not super sure if we had them donated, lent to us from Summerland, but there's a whole bunch of Summerland cans in the yard right now. Not sure if the source, and quizzing the fellows, still not really sure of where they were, because the people that dealt with that aren't here anymore. Very good question, though. I'm interested now.
Councillor Newman?
So in regards to this, we charge our residents already garbage collection fees.
Yep.
So my concern is if this is coming out of the fees that we charge for garbage. Or is this, we have we charge our residents for garbage collection. So this is something that in my mind would fall under the garbage collection fees and not under the general operating budget and therefore a tax increase. It could be a rate increase through garbage, but not necessarily through this process. So I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity to have it go that way or do it, again, I'd like to see a breakdown of our, how the water rates, the sewer rates, what we collect from people already, how do we need to justify that? And this to me is one of those things that I would rather see it come out of our garbage collection fees, and if we have to adjust that a little bit versus having $50,000 added to our overall budget. It's just a thought.
Yeah, and then it's a very good highlight on that as well. I think we talked a week or so back about garbage rates and whatnot, because we do it with the water, we do it with the sewer. I'm not an expert on municipal accounting and the rules involved, but it would seem to me the opportunity is very much like our water and sewer to use the rates to build a reserve, even if it's truck replacements and everything else, it would all factor into that. Makes a lot of sense to me as well. Something we're gonna have to flesh out over time if that's allowed and.
Yes, no, then that truly is, and there was money budgeted last year to do a rate review on the rates and what costs constitute it. And I can say just historically in the way the records have been, the way things have been accounted for is we definitely collect enough for garbage to cover all the expenses and even put some money towards either, it should be, the difference in the garbage fund itself should be one of those automatic transfers into reserves, but because that reserve policy was just created and it hasn't been, and hopefully maybe at the end of the year we can designate the money that way once we have the year end.
And asking the question is, the rate's a self-sustaining service.
Yes.
Where the rates pay for everything related to that service. That's a very good question, very much like the water and sewer.
Yeah,
Something my head says would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and my thought with that, so when we're looking at the garbage cans are on here and that in my head, they should be under, if we need to review the rates, now is the time to do that. There's another one that's on here that is the storm sewer model maintenance for $22,000. That's again, so that's on our capital requests here, but is that not something that could be charged directly to the sewer fund?
The storm sewer doesn't have rates attached to it, where the sanitary sewer
Sanitary
does.
versus storm, okay.
Yeah, the storm sewer is just part of the general fund.
So then do we have an opportunity between now and final budget to review the garbage rates and how they're charged and if we are charging appropriately and if this could be funded through that? I don't know if there is time.
Since we'll be starting the budget process very soon for next year.
Well, again, we are going to have the finance committee formed. That's where
Yeah.
those questions may be asked or the guidance might come from.
And it's a perfect thing to be working through with your new director of finance. As they get orientated. Yeah, maybe.
No, good
doesn't
point.
get orientated. It's, yeah. I can see what I can put together on the.
Councillor Evans.
Just a quick question while you're talking about garbage cans. Back in the day, everybody provided their own garbage cans. When was it exactly, I can't remember, that the city decided that everybody was going to get one garbage can and one recycling can? And then why is it that the city has to replace those? If they need to be replaced, shouldn't it be either built into the garbage fees that we're charging? Or if people need it right away, they should have to pay for it? That's my feeling anyway.
I think they changed when we went to the.
Bingo, yeah. As soon as you went automated and didn't have the fella picking up a specific garbage can and dumping it every time, you had to get something consistent for the mechanicals on the truck.
It changed as soon as we went to curbside recycling.
That too,
We
probably.
didn't have curbside recycling before that truck showed up. And then truck showed up when we went to curbside recycling. I think it was 2016, I think.
Yeah.
And before that, then we just had them slinging it in by hand, so.
Yep.
So my point being is it incorporated into the garbage tax?
That's what Councillor Newman has suggested.
Okay.
And that's why I'm saying the Finance Committee, that's something that they would be dealing with, I'm assuming, for next year. Or whatever.
Yeah, it's a little tight trying to make those adjustments right now with where we're at. And a lot of us are still learning as well, the little details as we find them, very much like what you're seeing. However, we'll be a lot stronger going into the next one.
Any other questions on those? The other one for more information was the ball infield leveling. Not sure why we had that one tagged, but if somebody could refresh my memory. Councillor Charney?
I was going to, before you brought that up, I was going to go back and say we never did finish off whether we approve this machine.
We'll do it all as one deal. I mean, this is the last one we had for more information.
Okay.
So we might as well just get it done.
Your Worship, I just wanted to remind you that the question was in regards to the size of the lip and whether that constituted a significant risk at the
That's
ball
right.
limits.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and it's something that Jess pointed out, that it's a little bit outside of the equipment that she has and the resources that she has to deal with it internally. So after X number of years, she felt it was better to bring somebody in to reset all the grades out there and then work again for a number of years before we need to do it again.
Okay. Because it's kind of becoming a hazard, a tripping hazard. We do have,
That was definitely the feeling.
we do have one gentleman on the men's team that's 92 years old, so I would hate to see him take a tumble out there. So.
Yeah, I've tripped over a lip out in those environments before, and it's fun when you land on the fence.
Councillor Newman.
We're on Public Works still. The brine and the Quonset insulation, which Quonset are we referring to?
So we have that galvanized metal structure in the back corner of the yard right now that houses an insulated interior brine tank setup.
Okay.
The rest of the Quonset is not insulated.
Oh, okay.
So the goal there is to insulate it so we have more full season storage of different things that are currently sitting outside, and we can move things around a bit better.
Well, fair enough, thank you. I just wanted to confirm that that's what it was.
Councillor Charney?
Just wanted to confirm, we do have land acquisition for 300,000. That was not on last budget? On our last sheets, was it?
To which are you referring?
The
Third one from the bottom.
Third from the bottom, from reserve 300,000. I know what it's for.
We are going to propose that at the May 9th meeting, that there be in the closed session, a final resolution from council stemming from that meeting, as well a resolution to bring that forward to the public so that we can openly discuss that. But the short of it is yeah, for the sake of timing and needing to have that expenditure go through this year, but also balancing all of the different balls that are in the air. With that, we're proposing to bring that forward to you in a closed meeting at the May 9th council.
I see you going for that button, Councillor. Oh, Councillor Rogan, you go ahead.
So can you provide a little bit more of information regarding the office renovation?
Yes. I was waiting for that. Yes, thank you. So the way the upstairs of the public workshop is operating right now, all meetings and whatnot are happening inside the lunchroom, which is a little untenable at times depending on what's going on. We have people coming in for breaks while there's things going on where people are trying to take training or whatever. They had proposed another extension to the shop at one point as well, and I've seen a few ideas on what they needed. When I look around at the floor space and who's using space, I think we can take some walls out and move to more workstations and bring things in a little bit tighter, so we can then use the back offices that were used to be the meeting room, put it back as a meeting room, and bring people out into other areas. Like most of the people that work in the shop out there work in the field most of the time and stop at desks for very short periods of time. So I think we can change the way it's arranged and make it work a lot more functionally just by doing an interior renovation, pulling some walls, redoing some wiring, and getting things set up so more workstation oriented.
Councilman?
Question in regards to the airport. I'm curious, in previous, and it's more a historical question, I think, is the airport set up as its own entity in the budget? Like, so that, obviously the revenue that comes in from the airport does not cover the expenses at the airport and won't obviously in this year. But I'm wondering, like, because it goes, airport, we've got things going on all over the place, airport up a little bit further. Do we know overall, are we going to present that we've spent this much upgrading the airport in 2023, or these are our goals for 2023 according to the budget? I'm just wondering, in the past, how has it worked with upgrades and improvements there?
So my understanding, the operational side of things, for our guys out maintaining things, or it is in the operational side of the budget in its own line items under public works, not in water or sewer or parks. It's in the public works section.
It's easy enough to pull out.
Yeah.
Same with garbage.
You're right. It could easily be moved someplace else as well, so it does stand alone. Right now, a lot of those, even if it's dike maintenance and stuff, like the little oddball things are all sort of under a general. It's actually, the sheet's quite long under the Public Works tab in the budget. But yes, it is sectioned off that way. There are other things, probably from a revenue perspective, and other things where money gets spent out there that aren't in the operational side. They do appear in the capital, such as our fencing and our earth moving and eventually lighting and anything else we might want to do out there to improve things.
Well, just maybe, and I'm thinking obviously going forward, since we are approving all the improvements to the airport, that it might be something that worth tracking.
Yeah.
So that we do have it easily accessible when we go and spend, $800,000 in upgrades on something. You might want to have these numbers for us in the future that we can reflect back on quite quickly, just to say, this is how much we spent at the airport, or signage that goes with the improvements.
Yeah, and I see how your head works on those, and I like it, because mine, I think, works quite a bit the same. I like things segregated out and split so that I can identify each function separately, and I do try to build my working side of things that way, so I understand how things work. The airport itself very much can stand alone, and I think from a reporting perspective, wouldn't be a bad thing to basically make it its own part of the world. There's a lot of things that go in and out of there, even the lease lots that may all want to come into that whole concept so that we can understand all in one spot so much, right?
Well, and also in regards to marketing too, is in the back of my head how we're going forward, that we might need those numbers, readily available. Thank you for that.
Also, one of the reasons you're seeing a lot of stuff up at the airport is because there hasn't been anything since 2017. Mm-hmm. This is the first time anything's been done up there.
And there's been a lot of grants.
Yes. And I do agree with Councillor Newman. Once we start to do the lots and we start looking at the lease situation, then I think that changes to a situation where it's tracked all on its own, because that will become an issue, and I think it needs to be dealt with. And if we continue to get grants, etc., I think the airport needs to be in its own little bailiwick, and we need to know where we're going, as well as the fuel costs that are taken and the fuel costs that are turned back in, because I know they're quite high. The fuel costs, the fuel brings us in quite a bit of money. And we never really see what that is at some point. So it would be nice to see all that bundled So,
Yeah, no, I agree.
yeah, Councilor Charlie.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what is the revenue amount from the airport? Do you have a figure or?
For 2022, it was $254,000.
$254,000.
A large part of that was fuel sales.
Yes. And just so you know, the fuel sales are not all airplanes. It's mostly snowmobiles and hot rods by the gas up there. So that's pretty much where it goes. Councilor Archer.
One thing about the airport is, as Mayor Getz had said, we haven't done a lot there since 2017. But because we had gotten that one grant for grading the lots, hopefully that will stimulate some economic growth up there, and then that'll help beautify that part of town as well. And in the past, because it was used by firefighting crews in the past, I think that if we invest up there, then maybe we can see a little bit more activity. Like right now, maybe it's only 254, but who knows? 2024, 2025, maybe some higher. Wouldn't that be nice? And so I think it was 500,000 that we had gotten from the other grant, 501 or something like that. So the one at the 519 here on the grading at 519, we're only paying, I think, 19,000 of that, the airport lease lot grading. So at least is not as bad as it looks. We're not taking the full 800,000 out of reserves at least. So,
Councilor Newman.
I know the CAO has stepped out and he might be the one to answer on this, but in regards to all of these grants with the airport, is signage part of the requirement for the funding? Because usually...
For the grants?
Yeah. Usually...
Yes, I've already got signs
Okay.
ordered for the fencing part of it. We haven't heard anything on the dirt works one or the earthworks one, but I've got the signs ordered for the fencing one already.
Okay, and then so is there a request in for that signage to see if we do need it for the other ones? Just because I'm thinking if we're doing all three, we might as well have one giant sign that just says, you know, here's our upgrades and these are, I know they're coming from different funding sources, but I mean, always it's a good news story to get out to the public that this is happening. So I'm just, you know, airport day is approaching.
Yeah, usually in the grant things, they have very specific requirements as to what the signs are.
Yeah, I haven't started work on the earthworks one yet. I've been focusing more on the fencing right now and determining if I got to move dirt before I put fence in. And when I get into the dirt work one, I'll look at the requirements then and we'll order one. The one for the airport fencing is from the same people, different grant source, but the same people that are doing the pathway attached to the Boak Street. And we got those signs ordered as well because those people hit us with here's our requirements, let us know what you're putting up and we'll get it through the Queen's Printer or King's Printer for you, right? So they're getting them prepared. Something to think about on the airport as well, long-term, and we're gonna have to make, like everything else, a bit more of a plan regarding the asset and the runway and the taxiway and the aprons and whatnot. The cracks out there are actually getting fairly wide. They've been getting filled with the cold pours or whatever crack sealant they've been putting. We are going to have to be looking at some stuff on that runway before long because those cracks are getting pretty big and unlevel. So that'll probably be the next focus going forward is what do we do with that. I do have some solutions that hopefully will be very highly cost savings rather than just mill it and put 2 inches of asphalt on it. A lot of new technology in smaller surfaces or thinner surfaces that are very strong and inhibit cracks. So I've been trying a lot of that stuff out the last few years, but it's definitely attention we need to put into that. It's not getting any better.
Any other questions for Mr. Lee? I think we covered it all. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
So if I can just interject here while Mr. Green has been talking, I did a quick total here. Of the 7.8 million on here, 3.9 million would be funded through grants. And just over $1 million would be funded through borrowing, which would leave 1.9 million to come from reserves and surpluses.
Thank you.
Sorry, 1.9.
1.9. So those are just really kind of high level rough, but it gives you a bit of a breakdown.
So we've had the input from Mr. Green and we've had the items for more info discussed. Does anyone want to pull anything from that, or are we happy with what we've heard? Speaking up, Councillor Charney.
I spoke to Mr. Green at the open house, and I was impressed with the machine and what it could do as capabilities. It clarified questions I had last time, and I approved the purchase of these for the I'm not going to say it, how they can be adapted for other things. And so I approved the purchase of the machine and the attachments and the floor saw, et cetera.
Oh, I guess we can all go home then.
Yes.
I agree.
Let's go.
Councillor Logan.
Yeah, I just want to say that thank you so much, Mr. Green, for being here. So it was good to have the opportunity to ask the questions to the person in charge. It would have been nice to have the other people who are also here in this sheet, but that was not the case. But
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you have questions about anything else on here, we can probably answer. We can definitely try. We did, I know Mr. McEwen's not here tonight because he was on his way to a conference, so, but I did talk to him about all of his items on here, so if anybody has any questions, I think Greg as well.
Councillor Logan.
I'm just curious, because next week again is our last opportunity. Will Mr. McEwen be in-house for our last budget opportunity next week?
I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, the only thing that we're going to be leaving out at this point in time is the action reconciliation. We're going to get more info on that, I do believe.
Yep.
Okay.
And the top 3 items from development services, it was,
Yeah, the social development.
Right.
and the climate adaptation.
Right.
Oh, that one's okay as long as there's grant funding.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
And then everything else was okay on that list.
Councillor Newman?
So we weren't removing the reconciliation
No.
at this time. It's just coming back for
Coming back.
discussion.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just
we're not
wanted to be
removing.
clear.
No, we're not removing.
No, it's not being removed.
No, that's not what I said. I said it's coming back.
Yes, and like I've mentioned several times, if it doesn't meet the bylaw that gets approved on the 15th, it can be amended and added later, once you have more information and you're comfortable with the terms of how you want it added.
Okey-doke. I don't
Yep.
see anybody hitting their mics here, so
Okay,
I think we're okay.
we're good. I've got enough direction to
I
move
think
forward.
so. I don't see anything otherwise.
I'm good.
You're good? All right. Moving on, new business, I guess. Any new business? I don't know, I kind of feel odd. I thought we were going to be here for like 3.5, 4 hours. I feel weird.
So did I.
Is that all we have? I guess we are adjourned if that's it. Nope. Oh, sorry, Councillor Egan.
I just wanted to report on a couple of things that I went to in the last couple of weeks, and one was the Honor House and Honor Society. I've handed out a couple of pamphlets, and Linda, I left a little stick. Linda, I left a little stick in your cubby with the 2 videos, and if we could show those or send them to the council so that they could watch them. They're only about 3 to 5 minutes long, and they're very moving. And one of the Honor House that's up by Ashcroft is absolutely amazing, and people should be made aware that it's available to anybody who's donned a uniform in Canada to protect Canadians, to ESS people, to RCMP. If you need help or they need counseling, there's a beautiful mansion that they can go and stay at while they are recovering or getting medical treatment in Vancouver. Their families can go, their extended families can go, because these kinds of things don't happen always just to the person that it physically affects. It happens to the whole family. So please take some time and have a look at it and a listen. And also the beautiful Jeep or Hummer that they were riding around in, they're going to auction off. So if anybody wants to support the society by looking up on a house in Vancouver or at Ashcroft on the web, you can buy tickets on it if you'd like to drive that beautiful vehicle. And then, of course, Silga. Silga was amazing. I'd say I've been to lots of different conventions, and I think that was one of the best ones I've ever been to. Not just with the information that they provided with us, but the camaraderie of everybody that was there. Oh, everybody was so friendly. There was so much information exchanged between communities, and I would suggest that we go to all of them, because there's nothing, I mean, you're just learning all the time, 24/7. Or 24/4. 24/4. Yeah, 24/4 for the days that you're there. Yes, and I also wanted to mention that I went also to the open house was it Monday? Was it yesterday? Yesterday for Stoyoma Dental Clinic, and I didn't realize how much community goodwill they do there. I mean, over 7,000 clients they've helped in the last year for free. So if you need a dentist, maybe you should go there. Yeah, I think that's really all I wanted to say. Thank you.
And I guess we are adjourned. Well, this is committee of the whole. We don't do council reports here. All right. Are you gonna? Oh, I know what you want to talk about. Go ahead. It's your prize.
I have such good luck with tickets, Dana. I'm going to buy one on the Hummer because I know I'm going to get it.
And this isn't a council report. This is something that I found really funny at the banquet. There was I think they're called Starlight Backpack Group, and they had a 50-50, and they raised $740 for the group and $740 in the 50-50. A councillor from Vernon got it and gave it back. Now, the $740 got, I don't know how many kids, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for an entire year. So then the other money went back and got, now for 2 years. And all of a sudden, I'm talking to Dan, I turn around, she's gone. She's up on the main stage and she's waving $50 and she's like, hey, the Merritt table is raising $50. Well, guess what? By the time it was done, another $3,000 had been raised. So good on you, Dana. Thank you for that. That was awesome. That was really fantastic. So anyways, we're adjourned.